You can help me finish the verse of Genesis 1 that we just heard. In the beginning, God, there it is, created the heavens and the earth, and then it continues. And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. No sounds of birds, no corn, no soybeans, no green things that grow and live on the light. It's just this formless and functionless thing waiting for the light to give it life. On February 3rd, 2013, darkness was over the surface of the Georgia Superdome. Perhaps you remember watching. It was the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl was, we might say, formless and void. The lights went off. Players couldn't play. Coaches couldn't coach. One of the fans was quoted as saying, "Everything shut down. No credit cards, no vending machines, everything shut down. People couldn't even get a snack to eat or a drink." It's that vision of people being stopped in their tracks for 34 minutes, milling around, trying to figure out what to do. The Super Bowl was functionless and formless. Darkness brought disorder and confusion. People couldn't function the way that they were supposed to. Life couldn't go on. Darkness is that inability to see what's in front of us, but also spiritually that inability to understand things as they truly are. In John chapter 9, Jesus says, the people who are in darkness are the ones who don't recognize who he is and their need for him. You know, in the dark, I don't know if you've ever been like me in days past, but can't being in the darkness literally cause us to imagine things differently than they really are? I think of lying in my bed when I was younger, and the creaks of an old house and the swaying of trees outside. It can become in my imagination like the creak of the door opening as somebody breaks into the house and starts stepping through. The truth and the nature of things changes in my imagination when I can't see them in the light. Sometimes darkness makes us think of things other than they are. Maybe I know some of you have been camping recently. Have you ever been out camping and then you hear a sound and it's just like a little squirrel or rodent pawing around in the brush, but in the dark, when you can't see it, it might sound like a ferocious wolf. You can't see it. Sometimes we can't understand it fully. And so sometimes we tend to be more fearful or anxious without reason. And we can't see things for what they truly are. Do you remember the story of Jacob in Genesis 29? What happened to him in the dark? Remember how he worked 7 years for his beloved, beautiful bride, Rachel? And then what happened on the honeymoon night? Anyone remember? Oh, his father-in-law, right, switches the daughters, gives him the older daughter that he wasn't interested in. Well, of course, you can have electricity in the honeymoon suite, so you spend the night and can you imagine waking up in the morning when light sheds on the reality? Was that? No! Were you the little less? That was... The reality comes when the light shines on things. And Jacob's got to be thinking, all of the devotion, all of the love, all of the passion, all of his affection that he gave to someone that was completely not who he thought it was. And I wonder if sometimes it can be the same if we get caught in darkness. How much do we pour out our hearts, our affection, our energy, all of ourselves to things that then when God shines the light on it and shows us what they really are, we wish we would have given them to something different. They weren't what we thought they were. Or how about that expression we use sometimes? You ever found out something that like a lot of other people knew about and you didn't? Sometimes you say, I was left in the dark on that one. Right? I was ignorant. I didn't have the information. Maybe we've been afraid of the dark sometimes in our lives. I don't know, just me or anybody else have an older sibling who would sometimes come out of the doorway and scare you if you're walking down the hallway to your bedroom? Or, right? Maybe we have some legitimate reasons to be afraid of the dark. We're more vulnerable to attacks or surprises or people tricking us. We can't see our way. Of course, as grown-ups, sometimes we may fear what other people do in the cover of dark. Right? We have that saying, under cover of darkness, because darkness is a place where evil isn't very easily detected. It's easier to get away with things. Which is maybe why we often tell our kids, and I don't know if some of you grew up with the rule, come home before dark. Don't stay out after dark. Why? Well, because in darkness, there's something that happens to us as humans, and we tend to think, I can get away with this because nobody else will see. And if nobody else sees, then there won't be consequences. And so that's dangerous for us because of what we might do ourselves. It's dangerous because of what other people might think they can do to us and get away with. Darkness. And so we also have dark nights of the soul, those times where we feel we despair. The world's closing in on us. We have pain and burdens. Sometimes you might think of our country, our world in a dark time here for the past several weeks and months. Sickness, racial tensions, people being mistreated because of skin color. We have people dying alone in hospitals without family. Lots of people being distanced from each other and so not being used to talk to each other in person. And so we get kind of used to just speaking in anger and short little passive-aggressive sound bites that hurt and don't really encourage peaceful conversation. Dark times. And ultimately, darkness is what life is without God. 2 Peter chapter 2, Peter describes that God has reserved this place for false teachers and false prophets who lead his people astray. And he says, it's the place of blackest darkness. It's reserved for them. It's the place that's separated from all of God's light and life. And ultimately, it's the place that all of us spend our lives here and unhappily ever after, unless we have the light, unless we embrace Jesus. So that's a lot of darkness to begin with. We're going to move on from there. But it's important to think about when Jesus calls himself the light, what does it mean that, how's that different than darkness? And why do we need some light in our lives? We can turn the lights back on if Dave is, if he's available. I thank him for turning off the lights to let us think about darkness for a while. Jesus has come into the world so that no one needs to live in the darkness, and that's good news this morning. This past November, I was in Japan visiting with my fiance's sister just to get a little bit better acquainted for an afternoon. And she was showing me around her city of Yokohama for a little bit. And I remember having one of those moments of, in hindsight, thinking like, who am I? Who was I? Because we were both Christians in a country that 0.5% is Christian. So we're kind of outsiders. Of course, I'm an American, a foreigner in another country. And the two of us were walking through Chinatown in Japan before having dinner at an Italian restaurant. So, who am I right now? I don't know. We had arranged to meet one of her friends at dinner. And as he joined us, grabbed something to drink and sat down across the table from me, he had a nice, kind, warm smile on his face, and perhaps just a tinge of a mischievous smile in his eye and a little twinkle. And he asked me a question that I certainly didn't expect, and nobody had ever asked me before. He said, "So, what are you?" I don't know how you would think if somebody asked you the question. I think there was a split-second response inside that was like, What do you mean, what am I? Isn't it obvious? Do I really look like an animal or something? Okay, what am I? And then I thought, oh, okay. That's a really good question. Where do I start to even begin answering this? Of all the potential options that I could say, this is what I am, what do I choose? But it was a different question than just, what do you do? Which we often ask somebody for the first time, right? And that tends to define us by who you are, and what you are is based on the thing that you do to earn a living and to pay the bills. But we're a whole lot more than that, aren't we? Especially if you're retired, right? Well, maybe you're not defined by a job anymore. Before you're ever a working age, what you are isn't determined by what you do to make money. Sometimes we can ask each other, well, how are you? And this is a great question to find out what burdens we're carrying, how we can support each other, love each other. And yet sometimes, aren't there situations where we might be feeling great, even if we're not really going in a good direction in life? The Psalms and the Proverbs talk about it. There's one psalm where the psalmist is kind of voicing his complaint to God, and he says, there are some people who don't care about you at all, God, and they've got it made. They got everything, no problems, no cares, no troubles, and if I were to ask them how they're doing, they'd say, great, I couldn't be better. And yet, once they give an account of their lives to God, the truth is, life wouldn't have been great for them because they weren't walking with Him. Sometimes we could ask, who are you? We could tend to define ourselves by the family we were born into, or some political party we may or may not be associated with, or the kinds of activities that we like to do. But even those things don't really tell us most deeply what we are, what our purpose is, what we should live for. I think our world a lot of times, and maybe students, maybe particularly more in your generation, mine, than any others before, kind of tend to tell us, be whatever you want to be, right? Make it up for yourself. Chart your own course. And we do have some freedom in God to do many different kinds of things. And He's given us many different skills and abilities. And yet, God gives us a little bit more definition than that, doesn't He? About what we are and what He's made us to be. He's given us a lot of good answers, so we don't have to just make it up on our own and say, oh, I can be anything I want to? Okay, that's a lot of choices. What would be good? What should my life be about? It's not something we just have to decide on our own. And for the next couple months, I'm hoping we can look at some of those answers to the question, what am I? Where's my value come from? What's my purpose for living? What at my core really defines who I am and what I am as a person? And I think we'll also find some good answers that God has given about Himself if we ask Him, what are you? God gives a lot of answers to that question in Scripture to let us know what He is and how that changes what we are. And so this morning, if you'd be willing, I thought maybe, I know we can't sing out loud, but perhaps we can say something out loud together, to ask God the question. We'll ask Him the question first, what are you? And then we'll let Him tell us something about what we are. So if you could ask with me the question, Jesus, what are you? Out loud. Could we do that? If you feel comfortable doing it, let's ask it on the count of 3. Jesus, what are you? 1, 2, 3. Jesus, what are you? John 8, verse 12. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Okay, it's kind of abstract. What do you mean by that, Jesus? What are you? We can think back to all those things that darkness is, and all those ways that Scripture talks about darkness and what it means. And start thinking about what the opposite might mean. Light. Jesus is telling us he's God. Well, 1 John chapter 1, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. And so Jesus is the perfectly incorruptible God in our midst, in our presence. He comes into the world so that no one will remain in the dark about what God's like or who he is, but they can know what he expects, how to have a relationship with him. Jesus is the light of Genesis 1, right, that brings order and function to people. Life as it was intended to be and flourishing so that people can do the good that they were created to do. Think of that Super Bowl again. The lights turn off. People are just helpless walking around. They can't go on. The light comes back on, and now we can have a game again. Same thing with us. Without the light, we can't do the good things that we were created to do and to be. Jesus is the light who enables us to see and understand properly and clearly everything around us for what it is. Maybe you can think of you go to the store and sometimes if you pay with cash, does anybody do that anymore? You hand the bill to the clerk and sometimes they hold it up to the light, right? And it's the light that reveals the true worth of the bill. Now, if the light shows that there's that little watermark on it, it's true, it's genuine, it's got value. The light shows what something's worth. And if that doesn't show up under the light, then it reveals that the bill doesn't have value, it doesn't have worth. Jesus shines light on things and shows us what is valuable. Where does that worth come from? Sometimes perhaps we tend to lean on things other than Jesus to teach us what's really true about this world and about ourselves. Right? I know it was kind of ironic during the historical period of the Enlightenment. Right? That was the time when people said, forget God, we don't need him to explain anything to us about what life is for or who we are. We can figure that out on our own. We've got the light inside of us, right up here. It's called our brains. Thank you. We don't need God to shine any light on the truth for us. And yet since then, I think we've gone farther into darkness. And we've turned to things like, we talk about looking to science for answers. And man, there's certainly been a lot of great scientific advancements that have helped us and have shown us new things and have taught us. And yet, science tests what things are made out of and how they behave under certain circumstances, but it doesn't tell us what they're for or why they exist. It doesn't tell us how we got to be here or why it matters or what we should go about doing with our lives. And so we still need light. Jesus says, I'm the light. Knowing me is enlightenment. Walking with me is how you find true life. A couple other things that light does, that Jesus does. Well, he exposes darkness. He exposes darkness in our world. He shows us when something is not right, it's out of order, and it needs changed. He shows us that in our own lives, which sometimes is uncomfortable at first, and yet, after he shows us where there's an issue in our lives, or there's a sin, or there's something that needs forgiven, initially that feels uncomfortable. And yet then when he shines his light on us, he frees us from shame and guilt that often pressure us to keep our distance from other people, our distance from him. And he brings us back into right relationships by shining his light into our darkness with his forgiveness and his grace. And that Super Bowl imagery, darkness is over the surface of the stadium. Things are formless and void, functionless. Jesus says his teaching is a light that enables us to function as we were intended. Psalm 119, maybe you can quote this. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet. Yes, I heard somebody say it. And a light to my path. Okay. Yeah, if I'm living in a dark world, God's word, his teaching, is what shows me how I should walk through life. How about Psalm 19? Maybe you've heard it. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. And so Jesus says his teaching is what guides us through life and teaches us the path we should take. Have you ever been given bad directions? Bad instructions? At least one. Okay, Levi and I can relate. I was given bad directions even by my GPS. Sometimes it can't tell the difference between a dirt road and like a genuine blacktop road. So at the end of an 8.5-hour road trip back from Pennsylvania 3 years ago, about 11 o'clock at night, I couldn't see. I didn't have a light to be able to see the roads for myself. I had to take a detour because there was some construction up around Bourbon, and I was trying to get back to Bremen, so I had to take another road. I took the directions with the GPS, and about 11:30 at night, driving 30 or fewer miles an hour on dirt and gravel roads between Bourbon and Bremen, I learned, I could have used some better instructions to guide me on my path. Maybe artificial intelligence isn't always intelligent as I wish it were. Or maybe my intelligence just should have been better. Would have helped. Jesus says, I'm the light that will lead you on the path and not mislead or deceive you. And so I think, how much do we listen to Jesus' words? How regularly? How much do I? How much do you? And we depend on his teachings and listen to them as the things that are really going to lead us to the best life, here and now and forever. Do we remind ourselves and listen to them frequently? If you want on your way out, and maybe this is something that I shouldn't have done if we're not supposed to pass things out, and so if we need to wait on that, that's okay. I put a couple of yellow-colored cards about this big in one of the plates back there before you exit. Just a couple of memory cards, some of Jesus' words or the scriptures that relate to what we'll talk about this week and then the next several weeks, that you can put in a pocket, put on the refrigerator, put somewhere on a mirror, and just be a reminder to you. Jesus is the light, and then of the final part that we want to talk about this morning, which is what Jesus says about what am I? What are you? What are we? Jesus gives a remarkable answer. And I don't know if you've thought about yourself this way before, or maybe you've heard it a million times. Maybe we could ask Jesus. Could we ask him together one more time? Jesus, what am I? Would you ask it with me? 1, 2, 3. Jesus, what am I? Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. You are the light of the world. Think about that one for a second. Jesus just said, I'm the light of the world. And now he tells us, we are the light of the world too? That's remarkable. No, we're not God like Jesus was. And yet, when we have God within us and among us, well, then his plan is for us to be the light just like he was in this world. And indeed, that's always been his plan, for his people to shine out in a dark world and for the people of the world to be drawn like insects to that light in the night. Anybody know the motto of the state of Indiana? Can you just say it if you know it? The crossroads of America. One of my pastors used to joke, it's called the crossroads because everybody has to go through it to get to the places where they really want to go. Right? The crossroads of America, that's our state motto. Ancient Israel, when God put his people there to be a light to the world, he put them at the crossroads of the world, the ancient world, right in the intersection of two of the busiest international trade routes in the world at that time, right along the Mediterranean Sea and another one going east toward the desert. He wanted them to be on display. You can read about that in the prophet Isaiah, chapter 2 and 42 and 60 and probably some other places. It talks about the people of the world streaming to this city on a hill, Jerusalem, and learning the ways of God and being drawn to his wisdom because his people would be on display. And so, what about us? What might it look like for us to be the light of the world? And what will it change about our lives, individually and collectively, if what defines us is, what am I? I'm the light of the world. I'm the light of the world together with my church family. That's who I am. That's what I am. That's what I'm here for. How would that change the way we live each day? I think being light can take a whole lot of different forms, and it can look differently in different situations with deeds of love and Christ-likeness. Maybe a couple of places to start is things that Jesus teaches his disciples right before and after saying they are the light of the world in Matthew chapter 5. He says, "Blessed are the humble, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart and the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for God's righteousness." He tells his people to be truthful, to be honest and trustworthy in their relationships with each other, to seek reconciliation if there's been somebody who's done something wrong and there's some baggage there, to seek to make it right. He tells people to be faithful, to do good to people, even who we think really don't deserve it and we don't like. Pray for your enemies. Do good to those who mistreat you. Maybe these are a couple of starting points that we can think of. Ways that we can be the light of Jesus in this world. Maybe two last passages that I can share with you this morning from Philippians 2 that talk about how might we be the light that we are. The Apostle Paul writes, "Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault, in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe, as you hold out the word of truth." And then he says in Ephesians chapter 5, "You were once darkness." Now that's all of us. That's everybody. We've started out being far away from God and not knowing what we should do with life, and until he teaches us and he shows us and he forgives us and fills us with his grace. He says, "You were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. For the fruit of the..." This is kind of odd. "The fruit of the light." Okay, I'm talking about light and fruit coming out of it. The characteristics that you see from a life filled with Jesus are goodness, righteousness, truth. And find out what pleases the Lord. Paul kind of gives us an adventurous challenge. Here are some things that please the Lord. Go and find some other things too. There are many things that please God. Go and do those and be children of light. And so let's be what we are. Let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven, Jesus says. And if you haven't received Jesus yet, then that's the first step. That's the first way you can respond, is saying, maybe I'm in darkness now, but I want to be light. Jesus, will you come in and fill me and forgive any of the things that are in my life that are contrary to you? Any dark places, fill them with light. And then help me to walk with you, that I won't walk in darkness anymore. We can listen to Jesus' teachings to remind us how to be the thing that he says we are. And then together, maybe we can consider, I don't have just a bunch of answers in front of me this morning, we can think about them together. How might we, as the church that Jesus has joined together, young and old, from many different towns and places and walks of life, how can we together be that light that other people look to and are drawn to because they see Jesus in us? That's something that we can get to explore together in the coming months and enjoy just practicing together in the way we relate to others and the way we relate to people who aren't yet part of our number. And so, to finish, quick recap. What is God?
Light.
He's the light. And what are we? the light too. Let's be that.